Good morning, Draco. Good morning. Hey, what's up, guys? So the other day I started one of my garden tours by making some basil tea, and some of you wanted more specific instructions on how to do that. So today I'm going to be making a huge batch of holy basil tea, and I'm going to show you how I do it. Alright, first let's talk about the different types of basil. This is holy basil, sometimes called tulsi. And this is the basil that most people will use when they're talking about medicinal preparations of basil. This is pretty different botanically than your regular cooking basils. Even though it is in the same family, this one has quite different properties. If you're thinking about using it medicinally, it also just smells and tastes pretty different than a lot of the other basils. This is more what you might think of when you're thinking of culinary basil, sometimes called sweet basil. This one in particular is an Emily basil, and this will make a really great tea, but it would be very different, and if you're looking for those medicinal benefits, it would be very different from what you can expect from holy basil. And then we get into some more interesting basils. This one is a cinnamon basil. It does kind of taste and smell a little bit like cinnamon. It's kind of similar to Thai basil as well. And this one is one of my favorite teas to make just for the taste, although I prepare it pretty differently than the holy basil tea that I'm going to show you guys. And I can mention in the description sort of the differences in how I prepare it, because most of it's going to be approximately the same. But cinnamon basil and lemon basil are my two favorites as far as taste for making really refreshing summer drinks. But again, medicinal benefits are going to vary greatly between all these different types of basils. So when cutting any basil, whether you are pruning or picking some to eat or doing this making tea, the usual best practice is to find a spot where the stem splits. You'll see new little leaves coming out from kind of the armpits of where some of the leaves are coming off of the stem, and you'll clip just right above that. And now that plant, the energy has been stopped in the main stem, and it will put its energy into those outward stems and basically double in size. Think of it like a hydra. Every time you cut off one head, it grows back two. So just to show you more up close, you can see the leaves coming off of the main stem here at 90-degree angle, and then at a 45-degree angle in between that, there are these two shoots. And so you would cut right here, right above where these two shoots are coming out. And you do not have to be that specific about how high up you cut. You could cut up here, or you could cut right down here. I haven't found that it really matters one way or another. Something else you might wonder about is the flowers. Should you be including the flowers in your tea? And that is up to personal preference. The flavor for me doesn't really change whether or not I include the flowers. And I also like to clip off all the flowers pretty regularly throughout the season to keep the basil productive and making more leaves, because once it thinks it's gone to seed and successfully made progeny, then it will stop kind of putting effort out into the world. So if you can keep it from actually making seeds, it will be productive for you longer. So this is all of the basil that I've cut off of this one plant. I actually have 3 other plants that I'm going to cut because I'm making a huge batch of this basil tea today, so that I can share some with my friends. Alright, so I've got my whole basket of basil, and the next thing that you might want to do that I am honestly too lazy to do is wash your basil. This is gonna sound awful, but I almost wash nothing that comes out of the garden unless it is like really visibly dirty. I don't wash it. And some of you might be appalled by that, but I don't spray anything in my garden. I don't use pesticides or herbicides, none of that. So there is nothing like harmful for me to wash off of my food other than maybe dirt or bugs. And if I notice like obvious signs of like bugs laying eggs or like an actual bug mixed into my leaves, then I will kind of rinse that off. But for the most part, I'm just too lazy to wash it because honestly, I look at it and it looks pretty darn clean to me. I'm not worried about just a little bit of dirt or dust. So the next thing after that, if you are finicky about stems, you could also remove stems. However, they're not going to impart a very different flavor than the leaves. So once again, my lazy girl answer is to just take this whole cutting and stuff it right in the tea. If you are wanting to save some of this basil to make tea later in the summer or in the winter when you're not going to be having fresh basil to make this with, then definitely you can take half or a third of whatever harvest you're getting for your fresh tea and go ahead and tie that together, hang that on your wall, hang that in a doorway. It's so pretty. Let it dry out and then store that to make tea from your dried leaves later. Normally I might use my kettle to boil water for tea, but because I'm making such a huge batch at one time, I'm gonna boil all the water in here and then actually add the tea to the water and steep it in this container. Okay, so while that water is starting to boil, let's talk ratios. If you were making just like 1 cup of tea, I would recommend about a tablespoon of leaves in that single cup of tea. However, I'm making this giant batch. I'm not going to measure out all my leaves specifically, but I'm looking at those leaves and this holds about 5 liters of water. So I'm gonna do that amount of leaves into 5 liters of water. You are also welcome to make this tea with just the basil leaves. But I, for this, am going to add some hibiscus as well. And I've also seen some people like adding rooibos tea to this concoction as well. I don't have any of that, so I'm just going with the hibiscus and the basil. And then I'm gonna sweeten that with honey later on. Now, for the other teas that I was talking about, the cinnamon basil and the lemon basil tea, everything up until this point will be the same. The only difference is not adding the hibiscus to either one of those. And usually I would steep those with the basil alone and then add honey and lemon juice to that. For the hibiscus there, again, I'm just estimating, but if you were making just 1 cup for yourself, about a teaspoon of hibiscus should be right. As you're steeping, it's important to keep this covered because the volatile oils in the basil will want to evaporate, and we want to prevent that. So for basil tea, you'll want to steep it for around 5 minutes, definitely no more than 10. And after I've taken it off the heat, I do go ahead and strain it. I'm just straining it through a mesh strainer after getting all of the bulk out with the tongs. And once I've done that, I'm going to add the honey while everything is still hot. Now, if you wanted things to be strained a little bit more finely, you could definitely run this through a cheesecloth. If you're worried about dirt or any bugs that might have gotten in, if you're lazy like me, cheesecloth will make absolutely sure that none of that gets into your final drink. Once I've got it the way I like it, I just bottle it up, and I usually store this in the fridge. It is obviously good to go as it is, but this is also a really, really nice cold drink in the summer. So that'll keep in the fridge for a pretty long time. I've never actually pushed the limits on it, but at least 2 weeks is what I've been getting out of it. But I strongly suspect you could leave it in the fridge for like a month or two. You do also have the option of making this as a concentrate that you then dilute later. So you could do twice as much of everything and then dilute by half every time you want to take a drink of it out of the fridge. Do half tea, half water. You can even do milk if you are a milk and tea person. I usually am, but this particular one, I don't think the milk goes super well with it. So if I was going to dilute it, I would dilute it with water. Another variation on this that I can recommend is adding ginger, just a fresh sliced up ginger root. I think that pairs really well with the whole like palette of everything. I don't always do it this way, but I think it works really well, especially if you are feeling cold and want to warm up. Ginger's really great at making this tea feel warming. In the summer, I wouldn't use as much ginger because it's kind of hot and I would like for this to be refreshing. But that is an option, and it does pair really well with the flavors, like I said. If you want to watch more videos about how I use this stuff in my garden, you can check that playlist out here. That's where I show you exactly how to harvest something from your garden. So all the way from figuring out when and how to harvest it to making a fully edible something out of that. So that playlist is here. And if you want to watch these videos ad-free in the future, you should consider joining my Patreon. For any contribution at all, you can get access to these videos absolutely ad-free, sometimes even early compared to when they come out on YouTube, although I'm not always very on top of that, but I do try to do that. And there's other perks that you can get on the Patreon as well if you want to donate a little bit more. Things like custom stickers that have been made specifically for my channel, and a Discord group that you can join where you can actually chat with other gardeners. You can chat with me. You can send me photos of your garden and ask questions or just show it off to everybody. It's a good time in there. You should definitely think about joining. And thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for all of your support. If you haven't subscribed yet, that button is right down here, and it really does make a difference. Even if that's all you do, subscribing really helps, and I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, happy gardening.